Right, well, good afternoon and welcome, David Arnold. How are you?
I'm very, very well and looking forward enormously to seeing you a bit later on this year.
Absolutely, and with a bit of sunshine, which is it's not really what Blackpool's famous for, if I'm being honest, but you never know.
Actually, I've been to Blackpool before in the with Jane McDonald when she was doing
right.
all the rest of it.
Yeah, yeah.
And so our ballroom. So I'm not a complete Blackpool virgin. I actually know what I'm taking on. I'm looking forward to going along the front and everything, I have to say.
It's funny, you know, we did an event at Blackpool Pier 3 or 4 years ago, and we were looking for an artist to come and perform. It's done with a radio station. And we managed to persuade Erasure to come and do the pier.
Oh, really?
And the only reason they did it was because it was Blackpool and they wanted fish and chips on the pier. So
yeah, you've got to.
Yeah, it's Northern history. Well, it's British history, I think, isn't it? Really,
it's wonderful. And apparently, the repeat business in Blackpool is second to none.
Really,
because people go to Blackpool, they like Blackpool, and where are you going for your holidays next year? Blackpool. It's more people do that than anywhere else in the world, you know. So
really,
yeah. So Blackpool's got something, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my niece actually, she goes every weekend because we live about 40 minutes from Blackpool, and she can't get enough of the place. I'm sure she'd move if she had to. So, but stranger things.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, I think it's going to like the Blue Touch paper from now on. I think everybody's going to be going everywhere in the next couple of weeks, I think. So Blackpool, watch out, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So classical music, David, it's not normally my thing, I have to say. But then looking at your CV, I mean, it's not just the only string to your bow either, is it?
No, and I've worked with all sorts of people like Tina Turner and Rod Stewart over the years. And so really what I do is kind of a crossover thing, because all those people like Tina Turner don't normally work with symphony orchestras.
Absolutely.
But they like to have big string sections, and normally the people they work with aren't used to working with orchestras, so they get people like me involved, because I have a foot in both camps, so I can do the Tina Turner rock stuff, but also I know about orchestras. Yeah. And so in a way, I'm kind of a dying breed, somebody who can do both of them. And so that's why they get me involved, because if you're just a drummer, you can't really stand up in front of the orchestra and conduct it and be taken seriously. So they kind of need somebody who knows about conducting to see them through it.
Right. So where did you start? Did you start with pop music or classical music? Or
I went to the Royal College of Music.
Right.
So I was there for 3 years. And then I started life as a percussion player. Mm-hmm. And so if you ever listen to Star Wars, for example, well, that's me playing the cymbals.
Oh, really? That's a pub quiz question, if ever I heard one.
Yeah, who plays the cymbals? I think that's a guaranteed nil point for that one, because nobody would know. But if you play in the orchestra, you turn up and you've got really no idea what you're playing that day. And that happened to be in 1977, after I just left the Royal College of Music. The sessions for Star Wars, and they had the cymbals, and so you better play those. Somebody else will play the bass drum, and somebody else will play the xylophone. And I got the cymbals. So that's my claim, that's my major claim to fame. I am the cymbal sound of Star Wars.
Well, we have a drummer behind us, so I'm sure he's taking.
Oh, you drummer as well.
So, what other instruments? Come on, let's go through the range.
I play the piano, and that's pretty much all the orchestral instruments that I play, because if you're a percussionist, you have to play the timpani, and you have to play the xylophone and the vibraphone and glockenspiel, and each one is a kind of a different technique.
Yeah.
If you're a violinist, you play the violin.
Yeah.
You know, if you're a percussionist, well, you may be playing the cymbals that day, or you may be playing the timpani or the xylophone. And so I play all those things, and the triangle. Triangle expert. And so I do that, but then the only other thing I play is just the keyboards and piano.
Yeah, well, I suppose with the xylophone, there's a certain sort of synchronicity and stuff, isn't there? So
yeah, well, you have to read the same music.
Yeah.
That's with the piano, you need all 10 fingers, and the xylophone, obviously, that's got 2 hammers. So.
Yeah, or 2 fingers in my case, is the case maybe. So, go on then, multi-award winning. What have you got? Give us a list of all the awards that we've picked up.
Oh, I've got sort of Classic FM awards for, services to music. In fact, wait, I'll show you. I've got it on my mantelpiece.
Cool, let's have a look. Oh, brilliant.
Classic FM, and it says awarded to me for classical music.
Right.
But when I got that a few years ago, there were only about 6 or 8 people who got one. Andrei Previn was one.
Right.
And Vladimir Ashkenazi.
Yeah.
Then they obviously ran out of real people, and I got one.
I don't believe you for 1 minute.
After that. So I've got loads of radio awards, New York Radio Academy Award for best music within station branding and jingles.
Yeah.
And so, for example, with Classic FM, which is the big one, that's lasted next year for 30 years.
Good grief.
And so that little tune that goes da 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 da,
yeah,
that's
you.
Played. That's me every day for the last 30 years.
Good grief.
And what people don't know is that if they played all those jingles back to back that have been played over the last 30 years, it's about 6 months worth of solid jingles for Classic FM.
That's an awful lot of creating.
Yeah. But of course, they play the news jingle on the hour, every hour, 24 hours a day, 365 days a month. And if you add all those up together, it adds to, a suicidally large amount of jingle.
And you've also done a lot of the jingles for our media partner, for Smooth FM, I believe.
Oh, yeah. I did it there for about 3 or more years. I did Smooth. And I also do LBC. I don't know if you listen to it up there. It's on DAB, but I do all the jingles for that. But I always reckon with the media and radio jingles in particular, that there's probably only 3 things that you're sure of. One, eventually you're going to die. You're going to pay taxes. If you write a radio jingle, finally you're going to get the sack after the final time. And I've written so many radio jingles over the years, and mostly got the sack from them after 3 or 4 years, and they want to move on to the next thing. But people like LBC, I think I've done 8 different packages for them.
Really?
But interspersed with other people who've done ones in the middle, and they kind of come back to me. Then after 3 years, they sack that lot because they want something new and all the rest of it. And then that doesn't work sometimes, and they come back to me. And 8 jingle packages later, I'm still back on there now.
Oh, we work in a global village, don't we, in the music business? That's for sure. Everybody knows everybody else, I think. So.
No, they do. Yeah, that's right.
So come on, enough of the little stuff. What about the big stuff? What about the movie scores?
Oh no! There are 2 David Arnolds. So this is something I thought maybe you'd be aware of.
Right.
There's David who does the James Bond.
Yeah.
And there's me who does all this other stuff with Tina Turner and all the rest of it.
Brilliant.
And we know each other. And we always get confused all the time. Yeah. Almost every week somebody would call me or email me just asking for him. And it's exactly the same with him. He calls me all the time. Yeah. And he said, there's another one who's called up. But about 3 or 4 years ago, somebody called me to say, this David Arnold James Bond film score, would you do an arrangement of it? And I said, okay, so...
You must be tempted to say yes, surely.
Yeah, well, I did say yes. I said, so me, David Arnold, you want me to do an arrangement of a piece by David Arnold? I said, yeah, okay. What's the film then? They said, well, Casino Royale. I said, and what's the title of the song? And they said, You Know My Name. And I thought, yeah, I do know your name. It's largely similar to the very one I've had for quite some time. So we certainly get confused all the time. Yeah. And we see each other at award ceremonies. And, those award ceremonies in Park Lane in London, they always hype it, first of all. And they said, we're very lucky to have the famous composer David Arnold here, and it might be for Classic FM, or it might be for Tina Turner, or it might be the James Bond one. Right. And we're sitting on adjacent tables, and we know that one of the David Arnolds has won. But we don't know which one's going up there. And so we look at each other, and there's photos of us with our fists clenched with each other. And all that. So anyway, but there are 2 of us. Yes, and normally, when we do these concerts, and if you look up online, others we've done recently with the RPA in Hull and Northampton, they say, we want to make sure that you're not confusing this our day with the other one, because I would hate to be seen as trying to pass myself off as somebody I'm not. You know, I would hate to do that.
Yeah.
And so we make it absolutely clear, and he does too.
Yeah, of course. Well, my name's John Mayoh, but I was once stood in a nightclub. And somebody came up to me and was raving about all the blues albums that I'd made when I was actually DJing in the place. So I completely get what you're talking about. And that guy's probably about 40 years older than me, you know. So
yeah, no, that.
So is it weird when you're conducting the Royal Philharmonic and you're doing the movie themes, and one of the other guys' pieces of music comes up? How do you cope with that?
Well, the thing is, all you do, and this sounds a bit like the people who played tennis or football.
Yeah.
You do this one step at a time.
Yes.
And so if I'm standing in front of, 30 or 40 or 80 people sometimes, you have to kind of focus on what the next step is.
Yeah.
And so as a conductor, and a drummer, you know this, Andy, as well, that you always have to think of the next tempo before it happens. Mm-hmm. And so if you're conducting, you don't kind of just do that and they start playing in the right speed. You have to tell them maybe a second beforehand what the speed is.
Right.
And so you're always thinking one step ahead of them. And that's kind of one of those things that's quite difficult to explain, because they're taking your lead. And they're watching your hands. And of course, you can't respond instantly. And if you punch somebody, they'll blink, but it'll be a second later. And that's exactly the same with orchestral players. You have to punch them about a second before you want them to react.
So how on earth do you cope mentally with all the different sections of the orchestra and trying to keep them all together? I mean, it's a lot more complicated than standing at the front waving a stick about.
There are kind of two ways of doing it. And just recently, because they've been socially distanced, all the violins have had to be 2 meters apart.
Of course, yeah.
Normally, they sit next to each other and they really do look at each other and they listen for the breath of what's going on. And the leader of the orchestra, the violin, is looking at the cellist to make sure their bows are going in the right way. And so a lot of it is self-contained
right.
When it's a normal size orchestra. But when it's socially distanced, they can't hear each other and they can't speak to each other. And then they just have to watch the conductor. And every one of them is their own leader.
Right.
And so long as they watch, and this happened in the last couple of weeks, you will get it together, but it's a new technique. It's a learning technique for them. And they're not actually listening. Now, they're more watching than listening. But, the Royal Philharmonic are fantastically disciplined.
Yeah.
And they respond to that and they try their absolute best, and it works.
Cool. And what about the working with the pop guys? I mean, what's the different approach for working with Tina Turner, for example?
Well, I think the difficult thing is that if you're working, and particularly with Tina Turner, that drummer was the loudest drummer I think I've ever heard in my life. And it's a bit like somebody, it's a bit like somebody with a shotgun or a rifle right next to your ear.
Yeah.
And every beat 2 and every beat 4, another one's going on. And so what I tend to do is put myself in between the rhythm section, because I kind of don't mind that loud, being a percussionist by trade. So I'm used to loud noises. But if you're a viola player or a cellist, they complain about it and they say, I can't play like this too loud. So I put myself in the middle of them. And I tend to have the rhythm section on one side. And this is what we'll do with you. There'll be a rhythm section on my right, stage left. And they're going to be kind of self-contained in their cage. And we won't let them out. And then all the other people, all the violinists and all the rest of it, will be on the other side, stage right.
Yeah.
Then the brass players are something in the middle. They're kind of half hooligan. And so they don't mind being behind the rhythm section, not too close. And they're far enough away from the violins to not upset them as well. So that means we get all the brass players next to the rhythm section and the string players on the extreme. And so they can hear what's going on, but they can also hear what they're doing. Right. And so we've developed this technique over years, and we kind of know how to make it work.
And is this personal to you, or do different conductors have different arrangements for who sits where?
mostly conductors now, the stage manager takes care of it. And because I figured out this method, the RPO stage manager takes notes of what I like.
Yeah.
He'll always set it that way for me, and then somebody else will come along and do a concert, and they'll set it up now with my setting, unless the new conductor wants something different.
Right. And
that's the way that works.
Cool. Who chooses the music?
A lot of it is the RPO, but I do as well.
Yeah.
And I think it's important. Well, I've got the program right in front of me, funnily enough.
Don't give it all away, but go on.
No, but I've done, for you, I've done 2 brand new arrangements, because I always like to, not do Star Wars again. I've done that before. And so there has to be contemporary pieces. So the 2 arrangements that I've literally just finished, I've written them down here. So from The Greatest Showman, A Million Dreams.
Oh, right, okay.
Which is a fantastic film and contemporary, and the most watched film for 15 to 25-year-olds that year. Yeah. So very, very popular. And the other one is, I've just finished here, is, let me see, from 50 Shades of Grey, Love Me Like You Do, which is an Ellie Goulding track.
Yeah.
And it's the most fantastic melody and kind of pop song as well. But again, that'll appeal to the younger people who will come, because mostly with these concerts, you would expect a demographic of kind of 45 upwards.
Yeah.
But if we're doing kind of Ellie Goulding, right from 15, they'll love that.
Yeah.
And they'll like the other one, A Million Dreams, as well. The most popular film for children as well, surprisingly. And so what I try to do with these programs is make sure that we do Goldfinger and things people like, but also appealing right across the board. So if you bring a 15, 17-year-old, they're not going to go, I don't know any of this stuff. What is it? Or, they'll have their own pieces that they'll like as well. So the idea is that we kind of offer things to everybody.
Cool. So what's your opinion of the state of modern music? Come on, let's see what you think.
Well, do you know what? I'm just working at an album, Great British Rock Classics.
Right.
And with most modern songs, it's intriguing that most of them now only use 3 chords.
Really?
Yeah, and it's fascinating. Because I've done arrangements of them, obviously I've had to analyse what they do.
Yeah.
And so the verse and chorus and everything else all is based on a chord structure of 3 or 4 chords. So it's 8 repeated bars over and over and over again.
And is that because it's all written on computer, or is that just a modern idiom or something? Modern style?
It is probably the computer thing, because, and I think composers from yesteryear, they would conceive things in their head, first of all.
Yeah.
And then they would check it on the piano and write it, and it would grow, it kind of germinate by itself. But a lot of the modern composers now find a groove from somewhere, and they press a button and there's a groove there, and they'll just, it's a bit like painting by numbers, and then I'll get a bass part.
Absolutely.
What fits? Oh, notes 4 and 5 are good. Let's change 1 and 2. And they can change it all, and they kind of build it up one thing at a time. So it's a kind of a different technique to the way that Gershwin would have done it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because he wouldn't have had that luxury of being able to write it and then play it back, which is so really, in answer to your question, it's kind of a double-edged sword, because it means that 20 years ago, in order to be me, you'd have to have £250,000 studio and a degree in music. And now you need to go to the Apple store.
Yeah. Not even that. I found a site yesterday where they actually where you can download the stems of any popular song. So the vocal, the drums, the piano, and it's in a way it's quite scary, because we run a small record label. I've been involved with music for a long time. I worked at PWL with Pete Waterman, and I was involved in the 90s Manchester, the whole, we were promoting records by The Prodigy and stuff. And it just amazes me how easily it is to deconstruct modern music. But then I also get sent all the charts. So I get the charts from Radio 1, Radio 2, Capital, blah, blah, blah. And the music that's on there, I don't recognise it. Now, I'm in the business, so I should know some of it. But it seems to be so split across a million genres that the kind of stuff that I'm expecting the orchestra to do everybody will know and love, but you worry whether or not those songs are still being written for, 5 years' time, sort of thing.
I think you get the occasional gem, like the 50 Shades of Grey thing. And actually, there's some fantastic Stormzy songs. And I think they'll last. But every other one that you listen to, will come and go.
Yeah.
And we call them kind of shooting stars.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it'll be a huge hit, and you'll never hear them ever again. And there's quite a few of those. And, this chord structure thing, it's quite interesting how music now is kind of manufactured in that way.
Yeah.
And it's different to thinking, I'll do something new. It's kind of what fits over this 8-bar pattern. And I'll keep on repeating that 8-bar pattern. Yeah. And if you strip the vocals out of most of those songs you're talking about, there's not that much underneath it.
Absolutely.
There aren't any counter melodies or key changes or anything like that. Yeah, but there will be with us, with the orchestra.
Yeah, absolutely.
You'll get
well, one of the things we like to do is put proper musicians on the tracks, because that's where you get the creative tension and the excitement. And I can't envisage being able to do it, but I would love to work with an orchestra where you have all those different musicians. Tell me, you compose, yes?
Yeah.
So where do you start?
Well, I think it was Gershwin or Lerner and Lower, one of them said, well, it starts with a phone call. And it's largely true. I just write things if people invite me to do it. And so that's the very first thing. But then it depends, what their vision for what they're asking you to do is.
Right.
And it might be, can you do something that's entirely unique and original and stunning, and you do something that you think's like that? And they say, that's not what I had in mind at all. I want something like... and they're not looking for anything original. And so I think that's the problem, that it's very rare that people like me are just given the opportunity to do what you like. Mostly there's a commercial aspect to it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it has to be monetized, and you have to kind of do what you're told. And if you want to be a composer and not earn any money, and you can go and move to the Hebrides and do that, but you won't get any money. So that's my view. I'd say the phone call is the start.
Yeah. Brilliant. So what's next for David Arnold then, apart from our lovely Blackpool?
Yeah, loads of concerts coming up. We've just kind of been unleashed. And so we're just dipping our toe into the water now. Are the audiences going to be allowed to come without being socially distanced? Are we going to be wearing masks? And, so we're not absolutely certain. So really the crossbow is kind of primed, ready to fire now. Yeah. And there are loads of concerts ready to go. But nobody knows whether they're selling half an audience or full audience. And we're still yet to know that.
There's a lack of confidence out there. It may change after this week's announcements, but all the promoters that we have spoken to have been saying the same thing, that yes, they're ready, but they're not convinced that people will part with their money, because they're not convinced it won't change again in 6 weeks' time. So
yeah, that's right.
I kind of think with Blackpool, I think we're probably on the right, the perfect timing for the event. Because it may change again in September once the winter starts to creep in. But it's been difficult, hasn't it? To work in the arts in any shape or form has been difficult for the last 18 months.
It has. And the last two concerts I would have been doing with Russell Watson, they were this last month, and both postponed.
Yeah.
And they're both
was that the one at Thornton Manor on the Wirral?
No, this one, the one that we are doing is in Audley End in Essex, a big stately home. Yeah. One was in Ardingly. It's called Heritage Live. And another one was in Berkshire somewhere. But they'd sold 10,000 seats. Really? And they had to postpone it and for a whole year. And I think what happens is, I don't know about getting your money back. And that's not my expertise. I don't really know how that works. But they certainly had to postpone them. But we have one left in about a month's time. And so hopefully we'll be up with Russell Watson and the RPO. Yeah. And everybody looking forward hugely to getting back. But the musicians, it's been a difficult time for them because no money at all.
Yeah. I didn't send an invoice out from March, was it 2019 or 2020? I've lost track now. Probably 2019. And I sent one last week, and the first one I've done for 18 months. So, we've managed with the furlough and bounce back loans and whatever else. But for a big orchestra, it must be terrible. I mean, half the reason we started our label was because we had artists and sound guys sat around going stir crazy at home.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the orchestras how they've managed with it all.
It's been difficult. And I'll tell you, some of them, there's one girl who's a cellist who actually is a very talented furniture restorer.
Oh, really?
And she's doing that.
Yeah.
But if you're a trombone player, I mean, you can practice a trombone for 4 hours a day, but that's enough to drive anybody crackers.
Absolutely, especially the wife.
Oh, no. And it's only 8:30 in the morning. What am I going to do now? So they are. I mean, it's been difficult and no money.
Yeah. Oh, dear.
But anyway, but that's fine. We're back now.
Yeah,
so,
we're back. We're in with a chance yet, I think. So, go on, final question. Ambition for you. What would you really like to be doing that you haven't yet achieved in your life?
Do you know what? I mean, I look back at my life and see all the things that I've done. I've conducted at the Royal Albert Hall loads, 40 times, and the Carnegie Hall in New York. And people say to me, if you had to go again, would you have, at the age of 18, gone to music college, or would you have become something sensible like a doctor or an accountant? And I say, well, I wouldn't change a thing. Because I don't know any doctor or accountant who wouldn't have swapped what I've been privileged to be able to do.
Yeah.
And I think those things internationally define who you are. And so I have to say, I wouldn't say I don't have any ambitions, but I've been really grateful, for what I've had.
Brilliant.
And that's all you can say.
Cool. David, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. We shall look forward very much to meeting up with you on the August bank holiday. And,
yes, absolutely.
Bring your shorts. The sunshine will be out.
I'll be counting the minutes. And do you still do the donkey rides?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I'll be there.